Greg, we can't hear you.
Thank you very much, Carol Ann, and good evening, everyone. I am Gregory Lewis. I am counsel to Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso, and welcome to the November 2020 Brooklyn Borough Board meeting. This meeting is being held completely remotely under the authority of Public Officers Law, Section 103-A, subsection 3, based on the ongoing local state of emergency related to COVID-19 under Emergency Executive Order number 242, dated October 22nd, 2022. I've been designated the chair of this meeting by Brooklyn Borough President Reynoso under a September 21st order. Ms. Church, would you please call the roll?
Okay, I will call the organization. Please identify yourself with your name if you are representing either the community board or the council member. If you're the council member yourself, you take so. Community board 1. Community board 2. Community board 3. Community board 4.
Robert Camacho, Chairperson, CB4.
Community board 5. Community board 6. Community board 7.
Pat Ruiz, second vice chair, Community Board 7.
Thank you, Ms. Ruiz.
You're very welcome, Ms. Church.
Community board 8.
Good evening, Irsa Weatherspoon, CBA Chair.
Thank you. Community board 9.
Betsy, CB9 Chairperson.
Community board 10.
Sandy Valles, Vice Chair, representing Jane Marie Kaplanakis, Chair.
Are you looking when somebody is not? Are you looking like when it's not the
I'm ready.
Community board 11.
11 Manuel Love.
Community board 12. Community board 13.
Lucy Mojica Diaz, CB 13, with my first vice chair, Jeff Sanoff.
Thank you. Community board 14.
Good evening, Joanne Brown, Chair, Community Board 14, present. Thank you.
Thank you. Community board 15.
Teresa Scavo, chair, present.
Thank you. Community board 16.
Janice Morgan, Chair present.
Community board 17. Community board 18. Community board, Council District 33.
This is Mariana Alexander on behalf of Lincoln Wrestler.
Thank you. Community Council District 34.
PC Addison on behalf of Councilmember Crystal Hudson.
Thank you. Council District 36.
Christina Serrano on behalf of Councilmember Chiose.
Thank you. Council District 37.
Hi, this is Mohammed Khan on behalf of Councilmember Nurse.
Thank you. Council District 38.
Edward Stern on behalf of Councilmember Alex Aviles.
And Council District 9. Council District 40. Council District 41. Council District 42. Council District 43.
Michael Sheldon on behalf of Councilmember Brannon.
Thank you. Council District 44. Council District 45. Council District 46.
Kim Robinson for Councilmember Mercedes Narcisse.
Council District 47.
Ayana Williams on behalf of Councilmember Ari Kagan.
Thank you. Council District 48.
Troy Olson on behalf of Councilmember Ina Vernikoff.
And the Borough President's Office, 8 represented. We have 19 members present.
Thank you very much, Ms. Church. The first order of business is the acceptance of the agenda. We circulated the agenda to all the members along with some other documents. Did any member of the Borough Board not receive the agenda? Hearing no person not receiving the agenda, does anyone object to the adoption of the agenda as circulated? Objections? Hearing no objections, the agenda is accepted. The second item is the acceptance of the minutes of the October, two sets of minutes actually that was distributed. First, the acceptance of the October 2022 Borough Board meeting, the regular meeting. That is the document that was, we circulated everyone by email that says 2022 10/06. Are there any, did anyone not receive those copy of the minutes? Any objections to the adoption of the October 6, the minutes of the October 6, 2022 Borough Board meeting?
I have an objection with regards to the minutes. It looks like the approval of the minutes is listed twice in this document, which seems to be out of order. So I will leave it to the Borough President to put it in the order in which it should be and then strike the additional paragraph. So approval of the minutes appears twice in that document.
Thank you. There is a motion to change the minutes as circulated to you all to strike the second approval of the minutes and to properly order it. Does anyone object?
That was my same objection. That was my same objection. I second.
Second, any objections to the, there's been a motion to amend the minutes by striking a duplicative section and properly ordering the first to appear as one of the first items. Is there any desire for discussion? Hearing no desire for discussion, does anyone object to amending the minutes as proposed by Chairperson Brown, CB 14? Hearing no objection, the minutes of the October 6, 2022 Borough Board meeting are amended to strike the second approval of the minutes that appearing between vote to pull the matter out of table and presentation. So amended, does anyone object to the adoption of the October 6, 2022 Borough Board minutes? So amended. Hearing no objection, October 6, 2022 minutes of the Borough Board are accepted. Next, the acceptance of the October 19th special meeting of the Borough Board, the minutes for that. We circulated that along with the agenda and other items for this evening's meeting. Did anyone not receive the October 19th, 2022 special board, Borough Board proposed minutes? Hearing that no one did not receive them, does anyone object to the adoption of the October 19, 2022 minutes? Hearing no objections, the October 19, 2022 Borough Board minutes, the proposed draft form, they are now adopted as the official minutes. Proceeding to the agenda, the updates from Brooklyn Borough Hall, aside from a presentation that is currently stated from the agenda, there is only one item or discussion matter. We'll combine them, and that is the discussion item of what the Borough Board tabled until this meeting, and that is a discussion of whether there should be any further amendments to the hybrid meeting procedure that was adopted at that special meeting of the Brooklyn Borough Board on October 19, 2022. At that discussion, there were some potential motions that were discussed, never second. So I now would like to give the opportunity to members of the Borough Board to perhaps make any motions regarding the hybrid meeting procedures that were adopted at that meeting. The hybrid meeting procedures and resolution adopted at that meeting, a copy of the resolution and the procedures, copies of those are attached to the documents that were circulated to you all in connection with this meeting. Anyone wish to make any motions about the resolution or the procedures? Does anyone wish to do so at this time?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, someone wanted to talk, or should I go?
No, I'll wait after you. I didn't raise my hand. I'm sorry.
Yeah, first of all, someone's showing their whiteboard, so maybe Sandy would like to remove that. I can't seem to get it off my screen. I had made a motion at the last meeting that those who are excused by the BP's office and allowed to be present during WebEx should not be allowed to vote.
Okay, you had made that, you're making that motion. Does anyone second your motion?
Betsy, CB9, I second, taking the motion from the table.
So, the motion is to amend the procedures for video conferencing Borough Board meetings, for hybrid meetings, to add a provision stating any person permitted to participate remotely will not be permitted to vote on a matter. That is the motion. Is there a discussion of that motion? And I believe I see a hand up, Ms. Witherspoon.
Yeah, I not that particular motion, but I do have a question about that section. Just for clarity.
You have a question on what's been proposed by motion?
No, that's what I'm saying. I don't, my question is also in that section. So I'm not here to second a motion. I'm just, you acknowledged my hand, but it was a little early.
I see. Okay, so there currently any discussion on the motion? I'll just repeat the motion so that everyone can understand it. It's proposing to add to the procedures, just to be clear about what document we're talking about. Let me share the document. This document, the procedures for video conferencing Brooklyn Borough Board meetings, it's to add a section stating that any person who does not attend in person should not be permitted to vote. In other terms, a person who participates remotely in a hybrid meeting should not be permitted to vote. To add that. Further discussion, I saw a hand up by, well, I'll go with Mr. Baptiste since he's one of the movements, and then we'll take it from there. I see some other hands. Mr. Baptiste.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so with regards to this, and I guess we have to acknowledge we're kind of brand new territory with this entire, concept of meeting virtually, but in hybrid, with half the members being present. So I think when the motion was moved, it took me a moment to kind of understand some of this. And I think we have to understand as well, this is not necessarily to be punitive to members, but I think we've already established that, there are mechanisms to make sure that people are present. So if a chair is not able to attend, we are supposed to have designees, and we can have multiple designees as well. And I think in the spirit of fairness, we don't want necessarily to have a dynamic where, half 50% plus one of the board has to bite the bullet and come in, while at the same time everyone else gets to do everything else, but not necessarily, have to do that, take that pain in terms of coming in to physically be there for a meeting. So again, I think I just want to say that I'm seconding this and I'm in favor of the motion, not to be punitive. But I think as we navigate this, I think it's good that we at least set that hard line and really encourages people to make sure that, we're proactive in terms of understanding what the schedule is, when meetings are happening, any communication with our designees if we are not able to attend for any given reason. Thank you.
Leave the order I have. Thank you, Mr. Baptiste. The order I have now is Mr. Cerno on behalf of Council Member Aviles. You're recognized.
So I'll preface this by saying that I haven't read that document too closely, but I just wonder, like, the rationale as to you're being counted as being present and towards your quorum, but then you can't vote on an item, and those two things seem kind of counterintuitive to me.
Given that there is a question, the order is that one of the movants, that would be either you, Ms. Mojica Diaz, or you, Mr. Baptiste, should explain the answer to the question, and then I'll proceed in order. Ms. Mojica Diaz.
I believe they shouldn't be counted quorum, and I agree with CB 9 that what would happen in my opinion is that many will start sending emails saying they need to be excused. And as CB 9 explained, that they have designees. We have 2 additional people that are alternate that can't attend on our behalf and can be present in person. I also did not look at the document any further, unfortunately, because I've been busy at work, but I do not agree that anyone that is on Zoom should be part of the voting process. In addition, should not be counted for quorum. That defeats the entire purpose of what we're doing. Community boards, and people need to understand there's been plenty of, they're already trying to take ULIP applications away from us. They're trying to take responsibilities away from us, and to start telling people not to come in person when everyone in the world is going into work and doing what they need to do. I think giving and allowing someone to continuously be on Zoom and giving them the privilege of voting, to me, is unacceptable. Thank you.
And if I may add as well, just as a point of information, and I would ask the chair to please correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding of the statute is those members who are not present do not count towards quorum. It's only those members who are present count towards quorum. So the question would be, those people who are not physically there, would they also have a right to vote? So I think that's what this motion is addressing in terms of, we should really count, those who are actually able to physically make it in.
On the question on the point of order, the statute says a quorum must be present. It does not state whether those who are participating in a hybrid fashion do not count toward quorum, otherwise have the right to vote. Ayanna Williams, Ms. Williams.
Thank you. On behalf of Councilmember Kagan, what would be the point in attending a meeting virtually if you are not going to be allowed to vote? I mean, I understand quorum has to be met, and the whole point in us coming together is to make sure that happens, but that's just, it makes no sense to sit at a meeting and not have the privilege, as was stated, to vote. We're attending the meeting, whether, and again, you said it does not state whether or not it's in person or virtually. And some of the council members may not be able to make it. Everybody runs around, has plenty of things to do, as with the community board chairs. I don't think that it's a fair statement to say that if someone attends a meeting or takes the time to attend a meeting, whether virtually or in person, that they should be denied the right to vote.
Thank you. Ms. Alexander.
I had a clarifying question too, which it sounds like in the current proposal, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we would still have to have an in-person quorum, like 50% plus one in person, in order for the meeting to proceed.
Correct. Under the
Okay.
current proposal, there would need to be a quorum and present for anything that requires for the meeting to proceed, yes.
So, okay, so then in that case, a majority of the members of this board would have to be in person and voting in order for any votes to happen in any scenario. Okay. Then in that case, I guess I agree with Ms. Williams. I think that people are able to weigh in and understand what is at stake when they're participating virtually, and they should still be able to vote. And to the extent that we care about in-person participation, which we should, the current, as it's constructed, it would still require a majority of us to be in person and engaging. So I think it achieves both things as is.
Thank you. Ms. Addison.
Mariana actually asked the question that I was going to bring forth, but I do want to echo the same sentiments. I think the beauty of this hybrid virtual world has allowed people a lot more access to meetings that normally were very difficult to accommodate. And I think, making it difficult for people to meaningfully engage, including our offices, would have the opposite effect. I wonder if folks are amenable to including language that either puts forth a schedule where there are meetings that are in person without a virtual option, and maybe those are not the meetings that have votes, or something that would allow for there to be a bit more flexibility in allowing folks to meaningfully engage without, a consistent mandate with being in person. I think it allows all of us a lot more flexibility to take care of our personal lives and our jobs and still, commit to these important roles. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you. Chairperson Camacho.
Yeah, I'm just a little confused because we do a hybrid and a full board meeting, and we make sure that the people are engaged, and we have the hybrids that it comes out of our budget. So we do go in because we have some of our seniors that can't come, that are very sick as of now, that they want to continue to be hybrid. So I feel that if a percentage of the people that are on the board, the young people or the people that are coming in that can't come, that may not have a kid to babysit, I feel that it can be used. But I have a location and we use the hybrid. Are we going to get funded for people that want to do this, that want to continue to open their community meetings plus do it hybrid? Or because if we're going to let them do both, then it's coming out of our budget. I want to know what's going to be the procedures in regards that we have half of the people to create a quorum, some of the people that are on, and also the community at large uses the service. So I don't know how it's going to benefit, or how is it if we were going to continue to have that, or are we going to get it with all the full board meetings? I don't know how it's going to work.
Thank you. Ms. Chairperson Camacho. Is anyone, Ms. Chairperson Scavo?
I just want something clarified. At our special meeting, we adopted a hybrid meeting of sorts. Now, we all agreed to self-attest to an emergency situation. Aren't we punishing the people in an emergency situation? Throw something out there. I come home from work, my husband is ill. able to sit and we're waiting for a doctor. I cannot physically come to Borough Hall. I jump online. Aren't I being punished because an emergency came up and now I'm not allowed to vote on an item if there is a legitimate emergency?
Thank you, Chairperson Scavo. Does anyone wish to speak on the motion who has not had a
I'm
chance to
here.
speak before I go to a second round? Recognize Mr. Baptiste and then followed by you, Chairperson. Anyone who's not had a chance to speak once? Else? Round two.
Mr. Lewis, I'm sorry for interrupting you. I'm new to this and I just don't know how to raise my hand, so I interrupted.
Of course. Please proceed.
In speaking with Ms. Kaptanakis, chair, I too feel that if people who join the meeting via WebNex and are part of the meeting and are counted as part of the quorum, they should have all rights to vote as they see fit if they are part of the quorum and if these meetings are legal meetings and if they're counted as part of the quorum. So I feel that we should allow the people online to have a vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vallis. Anyone else who has not had a chance to speak on the motion once wish to speak, and what all is acknowledged. If you're having technical difficulties, you can shout at me, chat, just so I can make sure you're recognized before we go to the second round, beginning with Chairperson Baptiste. Chairperson Camacho, you might want to turn off some screen sharing that I believe. Thank you. Anyone else? Round one. Let's begin round two with Chairperson Baptiste. You are recognized again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to respond to some of the points, and I definitely understand that, and I think I want to reiterate, this is definitely not a great situation. I'm not sure what the legislature was contemplating in putting it this way, because I truly feel that, we've enjoyed success in terms of using video conferencing. We should have been given an option in terms of being able to do that. The restriction of having half the people there, I'm not certain what that accomplishes. But to the point that was a point that was made as well, with regards to if they're establishing quorum, that they should also have a vote. That's one of the things. They don't establish quorum. Those members who are in the room physically are the ones who establish quorum. So if one of those walks away, that's it. The meeting is done. So if we had a quorum and one walks away, the meeting is done in all, for all intents and purposes. And again, it's not necessarily to make it sure that it's being punitive. And I definitely understand, listen, life happens, and I say the same thing to my board. And this is where we coordinate a little bit better in terms of making sure that, we're able to communicate those things. If it's a vote that we need to make sure somebody's present. I think the voice is still present in terms of if you aren't able to make it, you can still come in, but you just don't have that vote in that sense. But I mean, especially given some of the colleagues here, I think voices carry a lot as well in terms of making sure the 19, and I'm sorry, I think it's 19 people in the room actually hear the voice and actually will carry that. And I guess all to say that this is not an easy one, and perhaps this is something we can revisit depending once we see it in action. But I think this is one of the ways that we can keep skin in the game in terms of making sure, especially as we go into the winter months where it's like, okay, people are able to, make whatever, arrangements we can in terms of coming in. And I say that with respect to all my board members, and thank you.
Chairperson Enrique Diaz.
So I really just have two comments. One is, Teresa, you have two people that are designated to speak on your behalf. And I understand emergency situations happen and we all have them. We get stuck on the train and we expected to go. And then our second person wasn't intending to go, but you do have two people. And if there's time then the person can attend in person. Now, I have a question for all of those that are objecting to the quorum, objecting for people to vote and count towards quorum on Zoom. I'll say Zoom because it's coming out of my mouth. Here's my question, I guess. If we are required to have 50% of the people in person, required period, and everybody decides at the last minute they want to Zoom, what happens? We can't conduct business because you don't have 50% of the people at Borough Hall. So now back to my comment is, yes, if you think you're being punished for not voting, but you know what? The community and the borough president's office is being punished because we can't conduct business, and then we have to move it forward for the next month, and then the next month, and the next month, because we don't have quorum in person, and then people will start coming in person, and that's where your privilege is to have a vote at the table, not through Zoom. That's again my opinion as to why I brought that out.
Thank you. Ms. Addison.
Yeah, I don't want to reiterate the same points over and over, and I say this respectfully. I think the last time we had this conversation, we were allocated 15, 20 minutes for a vote, and then we ended up being on the line for an hour. And so I just think that we should be mindful of time. And, these meetings are after work hours. People have families, people have, personal lives that they have to attend to and would like to maintain as productive community members. And so if we're mandating for folks to be in person, I think there has to be a conversation about how much time we allocate for these meetings and how much time we demand of folks to give. I think the option for virtual or hybrid of some sorts allows everyone to participate. And, I think there are other ways that we can institute rules that require folks to come in person some of the time, but not all of the time, and maybe allow for that flexibility. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Addison. It sounds like to me, unless anyone else chimes in, that you are now ready for me to call the question, vote on the motion. Hearing no other person chime in, I will now call a vote on the question. This will be a roll call vote because we must reflect in the records how members have voted. Going to call a roll call vote on the motion to add to the procedures for video conferencing for Brooklyn Borough Board meetings, a new section providing that individuals who attend virtually will not be permitted to vote on a matter. When I'm going to direct Ms. Church momentarily to call the roll, members should indicate whether they are in favor of the motion, whether they are opposed, or whether they abstain. Ms. Church, please call the roll for all those who indicated that they were present at the initial roll call.
Community Board 4. Mr. Camacho?
Yes.
Oh.
Mr. Camacho, is that a yes and you are voting on the motion, or yes, you're indicating you're responding to the question?
Yes, I'm voting on the motion.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Weatherspoon?
No.
Mr. Baptiste?
I thought I heard my name. CB9 votes in favor.
Seven. I'm sorry, Ms. Reeves, 7.
Hi, I'm sorry, having some computer problems here. On behalf of Julio Peña, Chair, we do not agree. The answer is no.
CB 11. CB 13,
CB 13 in favor.
CB 14,
CB 14 opposed.
CB 15,
CB 15, no.
16, Ms. Morgan,
Did you call board 16?
yes, ma'am.
Abstain.
CB 17. Okay. Council District 33,
We vote opposed.
Council District 34, Council District 34, 35,
We're opposed.
37,
No, opposed.
38,
Opposed.
43.
Excuse me, Caroline, CB1 is present. My vote is no.
We vote no, District 43.
46,
Against.
46, yes.
That's a no.
47,
No.
48,
No.
CB3,
Anthony Busereth, no.
And the Brooklyn Borough President abstains.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you call CB10.
I'm sorry, Mr. Vallis, but I don't have a designation form that allows you to vote.
Okay.
Sorry.
Caroline, did you get the CB1 vote?
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have three in favor, 14 against, 2 abstentions.
That tally, the motion does not pass. Motion is defeated. I will now close that discussion item. The discussion of the hybrid procedures will continue to remain an ongoing discussion.
Mr. Gregg, what does that mean? That we won't do it at all, or everybody has to go in?
It means, Mr. Camacho or Chairperson Camacho, that the current procedures stand, and under the current procedures, there is a hybrid option with the Borough Board to have a official meeting that requires voting items, a quorum. 19 members must be present at the meeting, and those who are participating remotely under the procedure will be full participants allowed to vote. That is the current procedure. It has not been changed. Okay, I'm going to close that discussion item of the procedures, again, with the note that the video conferencing procedures remain in ongoing discussion. Borough Board members are always free to make motions to further refine them. I will move on to the next agenda item, which is a presentation on air quality monitoring from Adriana Espinoza of the Department of Environmental Conservation. Is President Espinoza on?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Adriana Espinosa. I'm Deputy Commissioner for Equity and Justice at New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Also a Brooklynite and constituent of District 33, Councilmember Russell's district. My team here is going to walk us through an air monitoring effort that we currently have going in 10 communities across the state. This is an effort that was inspired by the State Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. We have selected 10 communities across the state that have an evidence of disproportionate air pollution burden, and we'll be doing hyperlocal monitoring in those overburdened areas. And I will turn it over now to our Division of Air Resources to go through a quick presentation to give you an overview of what the department is doing. Thanks.
Thanks, Adriana. So we can go to the next slide. Randy, thanks. As Adriana mentioned, this initiative was inspired by the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which was enacted in 2019. The Climate Act is one of the nation's most ambitious laws, considering its requirements to reduce emissions and deploy clean energy, its comprehensive scope covering both mitigation and adaptation, and its transformative nature that aims to eliminate the disproportionate burden of air pollution and climate change due to our nation's history of social marginalization and institutional discrimination. The overarching goal of the Act is to achieve a carbon neutral economy by 2050. To ensure the clean energy benefits achieve energy justice, the Climate Act requires that at least 35% of the benefits of all New York State's clean energy spending be realized in disadvantaged communities. The Climate Justice Working Group, which consists of representatives from environmental justice groups from across the state and representatives of several state agencies, developed the draft criteria for identifying disadvantaged communities and voted to release it for public review. The Climate Act also requires the state to undertake air monitoring in a minimum of 4 disadvantaged communities, but this was expanded to 10 communities. Next slide. This slide is a map of the study areas in New York City and nearby communities. These draft criteria were also used to select communities for the air monitoring effort, which the Division of Air Resources will describe now. We'll have web links, we'll have web links at the end of the presentation where you can learn more about the draft criteria used to select the communities. Next slide. So the purpose of this community air quality monitoring initiative is really intended to help identify air quality issues in disadvantaged communities for future emissions reductions. For example, some of these long-term emission reduction strategies could include regulations for things on diesel to help reduce diesel emissions, or regulations addressing stationary sources. We also could have some short-term actions like local facility inspections and permit enforcement. We'll partner with and empower community organizations with easy to understand information on air pollution. We can also use this monitoring to locate leaks in natural gas infrastructure, and it will help us identify sources of greenhouse gases and other pollutants.
All right, thanks, Margaret. I'll take over. My name is Randy Walker. I'm a research scientist in the Division of Air Resources and one of many scientists working on this project. So I'm going to get into a little bit more detail about the actual air monitoring, how it's conducted. The state contracted with a vendor to do the air monitoring. The vendor is called Acclima. They are driving around in vehicles equipped with sensors And this coverage will allow for a broader geographical exploration of pollutant concentrations. They're only collecting data related to the air quality measurements. They're not making any other, they're not gathering any other information or taking photos. Aclima partnered with Block Power in New York City to recruit drivers for their sensor-equipped vehicles. These vehicles are hybrid Priuses that you see on the left. They're driving across all publicly accessible roads in the study area across the communities. They're going to drive each one of those roads at least 20 times during the full year of air monitoring. They're going to do this at different times of the days of the week, and seasons of the year. The pollutants that we measured, we've kind of divided this up into sort of three categories. The first group of pollutants are those that have concentrations that include local emissions and contributions from upwind sources. Some of those local sources that can maybe be identified by these pollutants include emissions from cars, trucks, fuel oil and gas boilers, which there should be less fuel oil as the New York City law takes effect. We could also find emissions from industry, commercial cooking, which I also understand there's a New York City regulation addressing that, electric generation, wood combustion, building fires and trash incineration. Those pollutants that you see on the left side are fine particulate matter, black carbon, nitrogen oxide, nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, and the vehicles have something called a total volatile organic sensor. It can measure total VOCs, and if it finds elevated areas of total VOCs, volatile organic compounds, it will go back with another sensor that could specifically look at targeted toxics of benzene, toluene, ethyl, benzene, and xylene. Two other pollutants that are really useful to measure are methane and ethane, and as Margaret mentioned, we can use the results from this assessment to take a look for things like natural gas leaks. We need methane and ethane in combination to identify that. Methane is an important greenhouse gas. It comes from the decomposing of organic material, landfills, sewage treatment. The last two pollutants, carbon dioxide and ozone. Carbon dioxide can help us identify combustion sources, and ozone is not directly released from any facilities, but it forms in the atmosphere from precursors upwind. So this next map is giving you an idea of what the end product is going to look like after a year of monitoring has been collected. Aclima has been doing monitoring in a number of cities in California. This is a map of the monitoring that they did in San Bernardino, California. These are PM 2.5 concentrations. The maps show sort of a heat map or a gradient map of concentrations. Aclima will produce a website that will be an interactive website. It will show the concentrations of the pollutants at the end of the year. These maps will also include other information like location of sensitive receptors and community-led complementary monitoring efforts, which Margaret will talk about towards the end of the presentation. So these results, what can and can't they be used for? Because these are sensors, there are limitations with the sensors. They're really inexpensive and quick to deploy, so they can be placed in the cars, and that's what's taking place here. Those cars are going to be collecting information every second, and all of those measurements will be aggregated to 100-meter road segment or 330 feet of the road, which is roughly a city block. So these sensors provide really wide spatial coverage, so that's very beneficial. They're useful for identifying potentially local sources of air pollution. We think of them as really a screening tool. But because they're sensors and they're not of the same grade as our regulatory monitors, we can't compare the data to our federal air quality standards or use the information alone to conduct enforcement. The sensors also can't be used to tell an individual about their personal exposure or health risks. The cars are taking measurements in the middle of the road, which is typically not an area where many people spend a lot of time. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about how we selected the communities for study. There the Climate Justice Working Group, as Margaret mentioned, they were tasked with developing the disadvantaged community criteria. They looked at 45 indicators to identify important information about the communities, such as climate risks, population characteristics such as race and income, vulnerabilities, including health, housing, and energy. Now, of those 45 indicators, 12 were associated with environmental air pollution burdens, and those 12 are listed here. We use those 12 to sort of refine which disadvantaged communities we wanted to pick, which would have a higher air burden. So the 12 represent things like proximity to areas with a lot of diesel truck, bus traffic, or overall vehicle density. Two of the indicators provided information on pollutant concentrations, PM2.5 and benzene. And the remaining indicators were really what we call proximity to the following layers that are listed there, such as remediation sites, chemical oil storage, power generation, waste combustors, and other smaller industrial items. So the indicators helped us identify the areas with the highest air pollution burden. We filtered those data by selecting the areas with the highest burden scores and 4 or more indicators contributing to that score. This process was presented to the Climate Justice Working Group for their input in the spring. So let me go into detail about what you're seeing here on the map. So these are DAC communities with higher air pollution burden, and the communities that were picked, the upstate regions are in Western New York, Buffalo, Niagara Falls, and Tonawanda, Rochester, Syracuse, the capital region, which includes the city of Albany, Cohoes, and North Troy. As we get closer to New York City, the communities of Mount Vernon, Yonkers, and New Rochelle were picked. And out on Long Island, Hempstead, and some surrounding hamlets close to Hempstead were also picked because they showed higher air burdens. In the New York City region, the 4 boroughs of Manhattan, Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens showed higher air burdens. So these maps illustrate the study boundaries that are going to be used for this effort. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about Brooklyn. And this map shows the highest air pollution burden greater than or equal to 90. Now, that score was based on those 12 indicators I showed earlier. Those census tracts really is what we're looking at here, with scores 90 or higher are in the orange circles. And then we also looked at sort of the overall highest tertile, which would be scores that were 67 and greater. Those are in blue circles. And the other scores, which would be below 67, are shown in gray. So you're looking at the draft study areas in blue and the air pollution burden scores. And as you can see, the study areas definitely pick up the high air pollution burden scores in the orange circles, and then the highest tertile in the blue. So I'll turn it over to, actually, let me go back to that slide. I'd also like to talk a little bit about the community concerns that we heard. We went out to we had two community briefings to stakeholders in the Brooklyn area. And these were the concerns that we heard when we were presenting this information. We were asked to make certain that we were doing air monitoring around the Bronx Queens Expressway, especially around the on and off rampways. There are a lot of playgrounds that are near those areas and also underneath the BQE. We were also asked to do air monitoring in Red Hook, particularly because of the warehouses that are there, and also a lot of public housing complexes. Other concerns that were raised had to do with the area near the Gowanus Expressway and Greenpoint. And now I will turn it back to Margaret to talk to you about reporting.
Thanks, Randy. As this project gets underway, we're going to be providing periodic updates to the community. In addition, our team at DEC will be reviewing the data as it comes in, and we'll take appropriate actions in consultation with our government partners, utilities, and regulated community as needed. We have a lot of experience with community air studies, and based on results we've seen in other studies, there could be a range of responses, such as identifying and repairing natural gas leaks, facility inspections, additional monitoring may take place, and possibly some regulatory and permitting actions. After a year the monitoring has been completed, DEC will identify any air quality issues and develop strategies to reduce the emissions and mitigate impacts. Again, this will be in consultation with the Climate Justice Working Group and our community partners. Next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some support for some community-led efforts that we have going on. Adriana, I hope is still on the line with us. Hopefully she didn't drop off in case there are questions, but the Office of Environmental Justice is developing 2 separate grant programs related to this effort. The one the grant application has already closed, and that was for capacity building. That was a capacity building grant. The other one, which should be out soon, is a community-led air monitoring grant. Any disadvantaged community, not necessarily those identified in the study areas here, is eligible for this grant. Grants will enable organizations to monitor air quality in their community to be designed by the applicants. This could be mobile, stationary, it could be the same pollutants or additional or different pollutants than what is included in this initiative. It could be student-led or a partnership with researchers, and really it's up to the communities, whatever they propose. We're working on getting the request for applications ready, and we'll have something out soon. So next steps. As I said, we anticipate quarterly meetings to update the community on the progress and to provide more details about the study a few months after the initial data collection. We're also exploring additional and more ongoing engagement between quarterly meetings right now. We're happy to hear from you about your interest in this effort and desire for involvement. Our community air monitoring webpage for this project contains links to the first and soon the second presentations. Final study boundaries can be viewed on this webpage. Lastly, fact sheets for each community have been posted on this webpage. And I think that's all we have right now. We could probably put the links in the chat if that's easier as well. If you have those ready, Randy. Yep.
I'll have to do that after the
Okay.
presentation.
Thanks. And if there are any questions, let us know.
Any questions for the Department of Environmental Conservation?
Hi, good evening. I do have my hand up. I do have a question. This is Joanne Brown from CB14. Thank you very much for that presentation. I'm happy to hear that this is the 10 communities that were chosen are draft, because I find it very confusing that community districts that support local truck routes and through truck routes were not included in this as part of this study. Specifically Route 27, which is a state truck route, which goes through Community District 12, Community District 14, Community District 17, also Community District 16 and 5, which seem to be included in your draft proposal areas. We all support a through truck route, which at this time also supports 53-foot trucks, which on Caton Avenue between as they exit Prospect Expressway to Linden Boulevard, they will idle for up to 25 minutes trying to get down that road. So we can safely say that there is a significant amount of air pollution coming from these trucks. We also support a local truck route, which is Church Avenue, which is the alternate to the through truck route. Also very traffic burdened, and those trucks will find themselves on that road for also 25 minutes trying to go at least 10 blocks. So happy to hear that these are draft areas. I do want to ask you to consider looking at these areas and making additional areas to study, because we are heavily, heavily polluted in these areas. Thank you.
I want to acknowledge in the chat Chairperson Buseret's comment that requesting to Department of Environmental Conservation possibility of seeing a draft study area that is overlaid with community district boundaries. Once again, thank you, Chairperson Brown. Chairperson Fuller.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for your presentation. I'd like to know if you are going to community boards during this presentation.
DEC, you can please do respond.
We are, we can. We have not gone out to community boards. Adriana may want to talk to you a little bit more. She is looking to work with some of the local community members and community boards to have a convener and work to get some advisory boards that would act would be able to meet more frequently, but we do have two presentations on our website currently that explain the project in more detail for each one of the communities that were selected for this initiative.
Thank you. Would you send the information to CB1? Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll get the information to you and the links as well.
First Vice Chair Sadow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lewis. We recently wrote a letter from CB13 to the governor and to DEC Commissioner Sagos, trying to explain to him that our area, Coney Island, Brighton Beach, is a environmental justice community / disadvantaged area. We have a traffic problem, even going from Seagate to Cropsey Avenue, that could take somebody 2 hours to get to. Okay, in the summertime. So I don't know when, if you did any DOT studies on that. Secondly, we have the arterial belt parkway, which can be backed up from Ocean Parkway to the Verrazano Bridge in both directions. Many of our residents have asthma problems and other health-related conditions. So I think that, I would like to get a response. I know that you had certain criteria on this project, but first of all, I'd like to know if most of the people who were on the council were from upstate and not from, the 5 boroughs. How many people did you have on the 5 boroughs? And can this be extended? I saw the map. You're near Coney Island, but you got to bring it down a little further to the south so that we are in the study. We've been asking for this study, air quality study, since I've been also chair of the environmental committee for over 10 years. This is not, appropriate, I don't think. I think that you should reconsider the other people, the other chairs that are asking for their studies, and also ours. And we haven't gotten any response yet from the governor or the DEC commissioner. Thank you.
Chairperson Baptiste.
I'll be very brief. I think my colleagues have really kind of mentioned some of those. And I definitely have concerns, especially around those portions that we do have major conduits that lead. I know that, for example, Ocean Avenue in my section of the district typically feeds into the mayhem that happens on, right by Parkside Avenue and Church Avenue and Caton Avenues. So I do have concerns in terms of what the numbers look like in those kinds of situations. So, and you'd also like to have a better understanding if there are any environmental things that mitigate those. So, like, for example, I didn't hear anything about that corridor, but if it's a matter because it's near, the park, is there a cleaning effect that happens because of that? Just so we can kind of get a better understanding in terms of what things mitigate as well. So I mentioned that Ocean Avenue corridor, Flatbush Avenue throughout Central Brooklyn. I think, I would be interested in seeing what the data says with that, because we just have traffic, at any given point where it's bumper to bumper for extended periods of time.
Thank you. Do any other members wish to raise comments or questions for the Department of Environmental Conservation? Hearing none. Hearing none or seeing no hands up. To the Department of Environmental Conservation, thank you very much for your presentation, for being present.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Next agenda item is a presentation on comprehensive planning by the Land Use Department of the Office of Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso, John Douglas, the director, and Aaron Buchanan, the deputy director. Mr. Douglas and Ms. Buchanan. So to introduce this item, let's have the executive assistant to the borough president, chief of staff, Mr. Freeman. We'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Greg. Good evening, everyone. Great to see everyone again. Really excited to be here tonight to talk about one of our favorite topics here at Borough Hall, comprehensive planning and the comp planning effort that we're undertaking in this office. I think our team was here a few months ago to kind of talk about this, and I'll just cover the top lines of what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve. I think we've all, gotten very familiar with the kind of ad hoc land use decision-making process in the city. And it really doesn't allow a great dialogue and venue for talking about robust neighborhood planning and community planning outside of kind of these very individual projects. And I think we all understand that ULURP is not a substitute for that. It's there as an input process for individual projects, not to kind of realize the holistic vision of our communities and the significant assets that they need to be successful. And so what we're doing with our consultant team is putting together a document that will serve as a kind of guide for how the borough president makes his land use decisions, so that we're not looking at projects in a vacuum, but looking at kind of how they relate to each other and to the borough as a whole. This effort is going to be data driven. And as you'll see in a minute in the presentation, we're very focused on improving public health outcomes and reducing health disparities, particularly in our low-income communities of color. And over the past few months, we've been working with our partners, the Regional Plan Association and the New York Academy of Medicine, to collect and visualize the existing conditions data for our borough. And I really want to shout them out for their hard work. They've been just an incredible team. And I want to shout out our land use team, who have just really been working very diligently and compiling a lot of really interesting data that I think is going to be super useful to everyone here. So tonight we're here to preview the full existing conditions data, which will ultimately be turned into a report for the public to comment on. And then we'll be following up with our existing conditions report, which will be published for feedback. And then we're also planning a town hall on November 29th, so look out for details on that. And we'll be relying on folks here to help us spread the word to your constituents around the borough. We're really looking to hear kind of how the data lines up with people's lived experiences. We always use the example that, the data may say there's a park on the map and it looks green on the map, but then when we go to it, it's a patch of asphalt and that's not really green space. So that's kind of the type of feedback that we're looking for. And we're really excited for everyone here to kind of take this, beat up on it, tell us where we're missing things, and really keep an open mind to how we can make this, really comprehensive and inclusive to what we're seeing on the ground. So with that, I'll turn it over to our friends at RPA to give their presentation. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, Asher. Hello, Moses. I'm going to share my screen and I'll let you start. Okay, so everyone should be seeing a deck with the title Planning for Public Health in Brooklyn, correct?
Take
it
it
away, Moses.
All right, thanks, folks. I appreciate you tuning in. We are going to do a kind of quick presentation run through just by way of overview. My name is Moses Gates. I'm the Vice President for Housing and Neighborhood Planning at Regional Plan Association. Next slide, please. And RPA, we're nonprofit, we're a research planning and advocacy organization, and we work in New York City and have done several New York City specific projects, including ones in all 5 boroughs. But where we're different from a lot of city-based civics is we work region-wide. Next slide, please. And I think there's an increasing understanding that the problems of Brooklyn, the problems of New York are not just the problems of New York, that the suburban housing market, transportation system, job market affects the city and vice versa. And we essentially work everywhere that the commuter rail goes, plus the Croton watershed is how I like to explain it. And encompassing 780, I think it's 782 or it might be 83 municipalities, of which New York City is one. Next slide, please. So kind of building off of what Asher had said, I really want to make the point that New York City is the outlier when it comes to comprehensive planning. Not just among its peers in the United States. Most cities, most large cities in the United States, and small cities too for that matter, have a comprehensive plan. But if you look at virtually any global metropolis throughout the world, they will have some kind of comprehensive land use plan that's long-term, that's forward-thinking, that has a spatial dimension to it, and that says where we're going to build what when. And that's kind of what I want to focus on. We have strategic documents here in New York, like Plan NYC. Us at RPA did one for the region called the 4th Regional Plan, but they're more policy oriented. They're not spatial or spatially oriented. And as you on the call can all kind of attest to, overarching policies are wonderful, but the implementation of them, where you build what, when, how, in which neighborhoods, that's really where you have to drill down and do some deep work planning wise. And those are the decisions that have to be made regardless. Next slide, please. So the Borough President's Office has kind of commissioned us, New York Academy of Medicine, to produce an existing conditions report that we want to get into with a real focus on housing and health. And this is what will inform the larger planning effort going forward. Lots of things shape community health, but housing is really a main factor of it. And health and housing are very interrelated. And as we kind of go through the presentation, I hope that becomes more apparent. So this, in my favorite little tidbit, is the largest municipal comprehensive planning effort since Los Angeles updated its comprehensive plan over 20 years ago. So we have a big geography, a lot of people, and a lot of maps and data that we have gotten from that. And I'm going to turn it over to Marcel to go through that.
Thank you so much, Moses. So far we've produced 100 maps that will go into the existing conditions report. Here's just a small collection of all the maps that we've produced. And in the iterative process and kind of working with the Borough President's team and the New York Academy of Medicine and feedback from the advisory committee that's informing this larger process, we've had back and forth and made some changes to the map. So in total, I think in my hard drive, I have like thousands of maps, but the ones that will be included in the report itself will be close to 100. I just want to highlight a exercise that we did earlier in the summer with the advisory committee, where we invited them to our offices to study the maps and have them provide relevant feedback to improve on them and make some changes. I think to Asher's point about the idea of continuing to improve the quality of the documentation that we have. One of the things that was evident during that exercise were the inequities in health outcomes disproportionately affecting communities of color. And so when we did this exercise over the summer, we had a section where we had all the demographic maps showing the concentration of population of color, but also age, et cetera. And then we had a separate section where we showed all the health outcomes related to chronic diseases, but asthma rates and some other variables. And people were coming back and forth within those two sections, trying to identify those associations. And so here, these two maps are showing just on the one hand, on the left, showing life expectancy, highlighting those darker purple colors with census tracts that have lower life expectancies than the city's average, and those parts that are lighter pink that have above average life expectancies. And on the right, you see the aggregate of communities of color when you aggregate Black, Hispanic, and Asian, and you see that there's like some meaningful correlations, spatial correlations in those two variables at the least. But that was just like one of like high level findings in two of the variables. But as I mentioned, we did a lot more maps. We classified all these maps in 8 thematic categories: demographic variables, health variables, socioeconomic and job variables, land use and built form, housing, transportation and utilities, environmental, and neighborhood conditions. So what I'll do for the next 10 minutes, I'll just go quickly through one example of each of these thematic categories. We definitely don't have time to go through the 100 maps, but we look forward to engaging with you in the sessions later this month. I think that will be a space for us to dive deeper into some of the individual maps. So starting with demographic, the general composition, racial composition of the borough is roughly 35% white, 27 Black, 19 Hispanic, 13 Asian. And you can see the spatial distribution of those groups on the map. But the map indicates these communities tend to be concentrated or clustered in a segregated pattern. There's a measurement called the similarity index, which intends to measure the rate of segregation. And specifically, the metric for black and versus white for the borough is 77.4%, which indicates a high rate of racial segregation. And we move into health, and here's another map showing the concentrations of adult asthma. We can see that the highest rates are concentrated in central and eastern Brooklyn, including Brownsville, East New York, Eastern Crown Heights, East Flatbush, and Carnegie. I would also highlight to the comment earlier from the previous presentation on air quality, there seems to be also concentration on the western part of Coney Island. If we go to the socioeconomic section, one of the indicators that I feel is most relevant to that theme is the location of service workers by their place of residence. So where the workers in service occupations, where are their residences? And you can see similar concentrations in the same neighborhoods that I mentioned earlier: Brownsville, East New York, Flatbush, Carnegie, Sunset Park in this case as well. And this specific metric correlates with other socioeconomic factors in a very strong way, including low income, high poverty, higher assistance in terms of SNAP or cash assistance, and communities of color. So in general, I think the concentration of service workforce is a good proxy for some of the other indicators that typically point to social vulnerabilities. I'm highlighting here the land use, which I think you're very well familiar with. The borough has a total of 276,000 parcels or lots. About 155,000 of those are 1 or 2 family buildings or low residential use. Those are mostly on the southern end of the borough. There's about 93,000 multifamily and mixed buildings, typically and mostly of them concentrated in the northern half. And there's about 5,600 commercial office uses, 4,200 industrial manufacturing, and almost 6,000 vacant parcels. A lot of what gets built or doesn't get built is defined by some of the zoning actions that have been undertaken over the past couple of decades. So this map is highlighting those zoning map amendments that have been adopted since 2002, and the difference in the colors in the hatch indicate the two administrations: red for Bloomberg and blue for De Blasio. Even though it's an oversimplification, most of the Bloomberg administration rezonings that were adopted decrease allowable residential density. In some cases, they're hybrid, in which some modest increases along commercial corridors were done, but for the most part, this is especially true for some of the Bay Ridge or Flatbush actions that were approved during that administration. And then the De Blasio rezonings were more of on the side of increasing density as a way to facilitate affordable housing and triggering mandatory inclusionary housing specifically. And so, of course, that has a lot of influence on where we see the changes in housing production. So this map is showing the change in housing units, all kinds of housing units, not just exclusively affordable or market rate, like together combined. And the blue census tracts are highlighting where we've seen gains over the past decade, where there's been a net gain in housing units. And orange shows the areas where you find net losses of housing units. Those losses are typically concentrated in more of the wealthier neighborhoods of the borough, most notably in and around Prospect Park. If we look at the rate of production of income-restricted housing, you can see that the spatial distribution of that type of housing has also been uneven, and largely, again, due to the underlying zoning and previous zoning actions from the past couple of decades. You can see the large concentrations of that in the northern half of the borough. Moving to transportation and transit networks, the northern half of the borough has the most access to transit modes and alternatives, including subways, buses, and ferries, and the Long Island Railroad traversing from downtown Brooklyn to into Long Island. But I also want to highlight here the proposed alignment, the Interborough Express, which is shown in the red dotted lines that would connect Sunset Park, Carnegie, East New York, and into Queens. This would is a proposal to provide passenger service, commingling that with freight. We understand that the process is about to begin environmental review. But that would fill a critical need in the southern half of Brooklyn, which currently lacks access to transit infrastructure. And of course, that explains largely what we see when we look at transportation behavior. Which neighborhoods have a greater amount of usage of vehicle miles when recorded on a weekday per household basis? You see those same neighborhoods that lack that access to transit are the same ones that depend a lot more on vehicle usage. Lastly, on environmental conditions, we know that sea level rise will over time is likely to increase in terms of severity and frequency. Here specifically, we're showing coastal flooding, and of course, neighborhoods concentrated in the southern waterfront will likely see the increase of that type of flooding, but also in the extent and the depth of the flooding that would affect, which is shown in the gradient of blues here. So again, like this was just a quick overview of some of the themes that we recorded, but each of the themes has between 10 and 20 individual metrics that we are documenting in the report. Just to wrap this part of the presentation, I want to show that here all the individual indicators or the individual maps that we have across the sections. The most robust section is health, to Asher's point earlier about the focus of this effort, really looking at the nexus between physical and social determinants of health with these health outcomes. But I'm going to flip through the other ones. And with that, I'm happy to take questions and open it up to discussion with the group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGredden Gates, the RPA. Questions or comments for the regional plan associations or the land use department here at the Office of Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso on the comprehensive plan? As it turns out, actually, I believe I lose the whip because as the parliamentary term is, I lose the power to chair the meeting because I see the borough president is on. And so, Mr. Borough President, I'll hand over the chairing of the meeting to you.
Thank you so much, Gregory Lewis. I appreciate your work. And to everyone here at the Borough Board meeting, thank you for taking time to sit through this expansive presentation related to the comprehensive planning work that we're expecting to do or that we've taken on. I want to thank RPA, the American Academy of Medicine, and all the folks who have participated in the work that we're doing to really showcase currently the existing conditions and helping folks understand why our borough looks the way it does, why why outcomes look the way they do, all related to health. I'd also want to thank my land use team, especially John and company, for the great work that they're doing in putting this together. For the Borough Board, what we want to do here is do a first take at existing conditions. I hope, of course, we got 100 maps and we're excited to show them all to you. And hopefully we can get some great input from you. But I hope what you're seeing here is that we're trying to work, or we are not trying, we are working off of the foundational principle of data and information. We're not going to make anything up. We're not going to be working off of anecdotes and personal experiences. We're looking at raw, real data about current conditions of our neighborhoods. And they are a reality. And we want to do that because right now, a lot of decisions being made related to development, growth, need in our borough are being made by mostly and exclusively by personal decisions and very little data. So there's no fault of anyone. It's just we don't have it. But now we are going to have it, and we're going to give it to folks, and we're going to ask them to make decisions based on these outcomes, or not based on these current conditions. We really hope that you would study them and look at them. They just made mention to the fact that we haven't seen a comprehensive study this expansive since Los Angeles. So it's a very serious thing and something that I'm really looking forward to getting done right. I don't want to take too much time away by, speaking, and really want to get to the questions and answers. And I'm looking forward to hearing what people's take on this is. And that's it. Just really appreciate you all. And of course, never forget to spread love. It's the Brooklyn way. And I actually want to allow for Gregory Lewis to retain his authority as the chair of the Borough Board meeting. And thank you all. And I'll be on listening to folks for the next couple of, for some time.
Thank you, Mr. Borough President. With that resignation, I'll return to asking comments and questions from members of the Borough Board on the comprehensive planning presented by the Regional Plan Association. I see Chairperson Baptiste, followed by Chairperson Brown.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank everyone from RPA for coming with that presentation this evening. I did have a couple of questions in terms of this, some interesting data that is coming out. Well, first question, with regards to the 20 attendees who got the first preview and provided feedback, I apologize if I missed it. Where were they from? Where were they representing?
Any of Mr. Negrete, Mr. Gate, or our land use department can answer that question.
I'm sorry, this is John Douglas, the Director of Land Use for the Brooklyn Borough President. Are you talking about the advisory committee?
Correct. Well, from my understanding, from what I heard, that there were 20 people who actually saw previews of the map and provided feedback, which led to some adjustments. I just wanted to know who actually previewed the maps in terms of what constituencies were they representing.
Oh, I see. Yeah, we the advisory committee, we can send a list of the attendees. It's like nonprofits, CBOs from around Brooklyn, and so happy to provide that list.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Also, and and definitely it's a lot of interesting data, and I'm just curious to see how some of the stuff cross references as well in terms of does like the density of housing influence asthma. Is the socioeconomic, or the travel, in terms of getting information about how that cross references, just so that way, when we're looking at information, we know what to look at, or we have background in terms of what some of the influences are that cause some of the data we're seeing on the maps.
Thank you, Chairperson Baptiste. Chairperson Brown.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that presentation. I also want to thank Chair Baptiste for bringing up those two questions that I was interested in, who were the 20 people who were part of the advisory committee, and then also to to understand those correlations between asthma and density, asthma and traffic, so on and so forth. I understand that we were invited to bring up gaps that we saw. After I saw the first presentation of the comprehensive plan, I was very excited and interested. And one thought that came to me, because I'm a registered dietitian, is how and not so much about food deserts, but potential food deserts. And if I can explain that, I worked very closely with Richard Barrick, who was the former land use director at Borough Hall. He guided CB14 in being able to be part of the FRESH program as it relates to single taxpayer tax lots. That is, we have many, many grocery stores that are single story that are ripe for development. We don't want to lose these grocery stores. We don't want our neighborhoods to become across Brooklyn, not just in my district, but across Brooklyn. We look at Fifth Avenue and Park Slope. We look at Nostrand Avenue in CB9. And now in CB14, we have Stop and Shop on Tilden Avenue that's going to close. That's a single taxpayer lot. So one gap that I notice is that we have these very vulnerable areas of development, which should be part of the the planning of land use in Brooklyn with regards to resources for food. Thank you.
Thank you. Just if I could respond to that just quickly, I think I know that the city did recently do an update to the fresh text amendment, and I think the Marcel, we do have a map of where every fresh district is mapped, and which is like the incentive to encourage grocery stores. I'm sure you all know that, and certainly absolutely looking for soft sites, particularly south along those transit lines. So absolutely, there's opportunities for seeing more housing on some of those lots, and making sure to retain the grocery store. That's what I think Fresh was developed for. So happy to discuss that in more detail.
I'm sorry, just to interject, the FRESH program is not expansive throughout the borough. We were able to just put a few tax lots or any tax lot that fit a criteria of being a single tax lot or a single story building. Understand that while FRESH did its job, it does not cover the whole borough. So that's actually what I'm trying to point to here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson Brown. Ms. Williams.
Sorry, Chair, I just wanted to say a comment about the first two chairs made comment to the committee. So the advisory committee, and John, if you could maybe clarify a bit on this. I just want to be clear that the information you're getting was not influenced by the advisory committee. I think what we were able to do is these questions that you guys are taking on, where the advisory committee made comments about how to interact with maps related to you talked about how maybe healthcare and density are related and how we could have those maps coexist. How we have the fresh fruit program and health and how those things can coexist. And I know it's not the fresh fruit program, it's expanding on that. Those are the type of conversations we've had, but none of the advisory committee members were able to manipulate data, right? I want to make sure that foundationally we understand that. So now we can create maps, and we're going to ask you to do the same, specific to issues that you think are important to get out to the general public about land use and about our borough, but none of it manipulates the data, right? So, and we have a very diverse advisory committee, which I'm very proud of and happy to show you guys the list. I'm excited for you guys to get the list so you can see that everyone from all walks of life, from all over Brooklyn are a part of it. Those people cannot manipulate the data. That's what's very important to me. So it could have been one group. Let's say it could have been 20 people that were all, $50,000 to $60,000 a year, Black members that just have homeowners, that are just drivers. Just that group only could have been these 20 folks, and it wouldn't have changed the data. So while it is a diverse group of people, and we will give you that list, I just want to really emphasize that no one can manipulate data. Data is data. All we can do is put data on maps. I'm gonna make sure that we make maps that you think are meaningful to the discussion, versus thinking that we could change these maps. All right. So I just want to make that clear, and we'd love if anyone who has a follow-up or concerns about that and why a concern about that, so that we can clarify and make you feel more comfortable that what you're getting, what you see there, is raw data being compiled in map form.
Yeah, Mr. Borough President, sorry if I misunderstood that portion. Absolutely. No, we contracted RPA and New York Academy of Medicine to help us identify the most relevant data that is separate from, just we try to get as objective as possible. And that was the project team that we relied on to help us sort through that information. And we've been eternally grateful for their support and their knowledge and expertise that they bring to the table. I threw in the list of the advisory committee members to the chat here, so I just want to make sure you all have that, and we'll certainly send it, in an email or some other form, shortly. So yeah, I just want to make sure that the advisory committee just with these organizations who took a look at the data that RPA and NIAM worked with us to collect and provided some of their expertise with their communities, with their scope of work on a first crack at this conversation, which was like, what missing pieces of data are we not getting? What do we need to look for? And so they were really helpful in providing some feedback there. But this information was, collated before they, were at the table on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Borough President and Douglas. Ms. Williams, followed by Councilmember Hanif.
So it was a great presentation, and I understand what it does, and I have a question, if you would. As we all notice, Brooklyn is developing, redeveloping, whatever you want to call it, but there's constant demolition and construction, and that's got to have some type of environmental impact because it's definitely affecting people's breathing. It's affecting, allergies. It's affecting a lot of things. Is any of that going to be considered in this environmental study? That's my question.
Yes, we have a couple of indicators that speak to the trends of recent development. I highlighted a few that spoke specifically about the net changes in terms of housing production and income restricted housing. But we have a couple other maps that speak to the amount of development completed over the past decade, showing the spatial distribution of that development. We also have another one that speaks to building alterations. So it may not be a full demolition and building an entirely new building, but significant alterations that also speak to, I think, your concern. And there's a few other related maps that I'm happy to discuss further at a different space. But yeah, we have several indicators that speak to that issue.
Councilmember Hanif.
Hi, good evening. Thank you to the BP and the land use team and all the partners for this presentation. I'm really excited as a council member to have some tools, some thoughtful tools with maps and clear data. I wanted to know if building affordable housing is still going to be contingent on MIH, like is that the affordability threshold? And will there be a sort of priority neighborhoods list as to where we must build? Just curious about those 2 points, and maybe I'll have some follow-up.
I'm happy to take this one. I think the second question, I think, can you repeat the second question again?
Yeah, if there will be like a layout of where we
neighborhoods, right?
Which neighborhoods.
Right. Yeah, I think we'll hope to develop recommendations based on like topologies of neighborhoods. So we know that Brooklyn doesn't have a ton of, it's very diverse in terms of land use that Marcel pointed out in his presentation. And so I think hopefully we'll recognize that there are some common characteristics that some neighborhoods have and identify strategies for growth from that perspective, recognizing that all communities are different. I think that's a big picture. I'll turn over to Asher for the other one.
Okay, sorry, Councilmember, can you repeat the other question?
Yeah, I just wanted to know if building affordable housing will still be contingent on MIH thresholds.
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting point of discussion as we work through this. None of what we're doing here has any binding effect, so to speak. We don't have the ability to change MIH through this process. But I think what we're trying to do and achieve is through a data-driven process, identify where the needs are. And I think MIH, as we've all discussed for many years now, is not quite meeting the need. Having said that, we're also trying to kind of balance out the overall need for housing with the limitations of the tools we have at the city level.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
I want to expand on that as well. So right now, the only way we can determine whether or not, determine without a shadow of a doubt how much affordable housing a neighborhood would get, we would need to know the zoning. We would need to know a zoning text that would be applied to that neighborhood, and then through that extrapolate the affordable housing that would come almost exclusively through MIH. And then we can do things like looking at city-owned sites and setting a bar for ourselves, like saying 100% of development in city-owned sites should be affordable. We can do those things only because that's what we have. Like Asher said, those are the tools we have at our disposal. We're not talking about looking at private lots that are going to have, let's say, 100 units and thinking we're going to extrapolate 50% affordable housing from it. That's not the way we can look at it, because that's not guaranteed, and the zoning doesn't call for that. What the zoning does call for is MIH. So we'll be giving a floor more than any anticipation. We're just going to give, the law, I guess, and what it gives us. The other thing is what neighborhoods must build. We won't be necessarily targeting individual neighborhoods, but what we are going to do is build a characteristics of neighborhoods, which can speak to, low density, transit rich, park rich, school rich. We might have, and I don't know what that is yet, because we're still doing all this work, but we might have a system or an approach that, if let's say a neighborhood falls within those guidelines and those principles, would be one that we would hope can see growth. And other ones where there's too much density and so forth. So it all depends. And the data is going to really allow for us to dictate what those outcomes are, or could dictate what those outcomes are. But I think we're a little ways away from being able to say exactly what neighborhoods would come away and so forth. But we are going to have, you will have a sense through our planning where we think growth can happen.
Thank you, Mr. Borough President, Councilmember Hanif, Mr. Freeman. Other questions or comments on the comprehensive plan? Before acknowledging you and recognizing you, Chairperson Baptiste, I want to know, does anyone who's not yet had a chance to question or comment wish to speak? Go for round two. Anyone like to speak? Questions or comments on the comprehensive plan? Or we go to round two. Chairperson Camacho, once again, could you to click off your white? Thank you. Okay, hearing no other individuals wanting to speak, we'll go for round two. Chairperson Baptiste.
Thanks, and I'll be very quick. Just wanted to confirm time frame and next steps. So my understanding is there's going to be a report that's developed from this. So I guess we're in the data gathering phase. There will be a report, and then I think there's public commentary that's scheduled after that. Can you provide some semblance of a time frame just so that we can kind of gather questions as well?
Yeah, so we will be organizing a town hall later in November. I think we have a date that's scheduled. We can share it with you as well. And I think that's really the point where we're going to have a more public and robust conversation about the existing conditions. I think this was just an opportunity first, just for you all to see the information that we've been seeing and hearing and looking at, and so it'll be an opportunity for the whole public to really engage on this. So, of course, I think would love to rely on your networks to get the word out about that. And we'll ask partially the role of the advisory committee is to help us get the word out about this planning effort and to help get folks to the table to hear their opinions, to hear what's going on. And like I said, like the borough president and others have said, just to identify those gaps in data and where we need to spend a little more attention to before we finalize the final existing conditions document.
And to elaborate on to expand on what Mr. Douglas said, the live records we have of the minutes of this meeting, the town hall will be November 29th, Tuesday, November 29th.
Right. Great, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll close that item. Thank you very much to Mrs. DeGretton Gates and the Regional Plan Association for the presentation, as well as the Land Use Department here at the Office of Brooklyn Borough President, John Douglas and Aaron Buchanan, and also thank you, Mr. Chief of Staff. Moving on to the agenda, the agenda as circulated to you says there is a cohort 3. There is no cohort 3. It's really just now new business. There being no other unfinished business from the last special meeting. That unfinished business was resolved with agenda item 4. So new business, we'll turn it over to you all, Brooklyn Borough Board members to present reports. In the interest of time, I'm going to limit members to making 2-minute reports, no more than 2 minutes. I'll sort of strictly enforce that in the interest of time, since we are very close to the agenda stated, the intended end time of this meeting. Reports, new business for members of the Brooklyn Borough Board. 2 minutes. Chairperson Baptiste.
Me again. And I'll be very, very brief. I think just reflecting back on the conversation we had with respect to the virtual meetings, and I think, at least speaking for myself and for some members of my board, I think that while we, community boards and other public bodies have been given an option with respect to virtual meetings and teleconferencing, I'm not sure that there are a lot of people, at least speaking for myself, I've heard a lot in terms of feedback in terms of, does this really meet the need of what we're trying to do? Because we still have the issue of people biting the bullet in terms of half come and half don't come, and how that gets managed. Does that really accomplish the goal of what we're trying to do, is encourage participation and make sure that people can fully participate? I think that especially coming out of the pandemic, I think one of the things we want to do is consider ways that we can work better, smarter, and achieve that goal of participation and openness. So I wanted to put it out in terms of if it was possible or something of interest to the board, whether we can draft something that we might be able to send, at least open a dialogue with the state legislature in terms of improvements they might be able to make to this law, so that way we can allow for more participation without, things that are onerous, like the quorum that has to be in person.
Thank you, Chairperson Baptiste. Other reports or new business or other new business from members?
This is Borough President Reynoso. I don't know if I'm a board member, but just want to double down on Chair Baptiste's statement. The idea of the open meetings law, was in an effort to allow for people to participate, and was put together during a time when virtual meetings were never even considered. But they have become a tool by which we're allowing for folks that traditionally wouldn't be able to make it personally to show up, and think that an effort made by the borough board or chairs to communicate to the state, the values of a hybrid style or type meeting or opportunities of that sort, that we would be able to be partners in that as well, as a borough, as borough hall. So I guess I'm seconding effort to really communicate the value of the virtual meeting to the state.
On that item, does anyone object to that proposal? There's no objection. We at Borough Hall will assume responsibility for drafting resolution, potential proposals to the state and circulating it to board members for comment. Put that on the agenda for another borough board, a future borough board meeting. If there's no objection, start to work on that. We'll make that notation and add it to the agenda. Mr. Cerna.
Not sure if this is, I don't know if you were gonna do old business, but it's quick. I never got the slides from the Con Edison presentation, so if folks could re-up that, I would really appreciate it.
We'll certainly get that over to you, Mr. Cerna. Councilmember Felix.
Thank you so much.
Other new business. Reports. Comments. Hearing none, I'll just add one more note for Borough Hall. As it's clear, and you certainly have to thank Ms. Church for staying on top of this. If the mayor continues to extend the COVID state of emergency, just to be very clear, it is Borough Hall's intention to continue these fully virtual meetings as the law allows under that local state of emergency. When we last met, the mayor had not yet extended it. So should there be another extension, we will continue as is. We intend to proceed as we have been under the COVID state of emergency, the local state of emergency. So it is currently slated to expire November 21st. That would be before we are next slated to meet. If it happens to be extended through December 6th, we will meet virtually. Otherwise, if it ends, we will proceed to the hybrid procedures that were voted on at the special meeting in October and that are the current hybrid procedures as they stand. We are next scheduled to meet on Tuesday, December 6th. Ample time for everyone to have recovered from their tryptophan hangover and all of those other activities. That also will be after the town hall that we talked about for comprehensive planning. So that'd probably be the next time when we would all see each other. There being no further business, does anyone object to adjourning this borough board meeting until Tuesday, December 6th? Any objections? Mr. Baptiste. Withdrawn. Hearing no objections, may everyone have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you in December, again, if not before, for the town hall on comprehensive planning on Tuesday, November 29th. Details to follow.
Thank you. Good night.
Happy holidays, and remember to vote.
Take care.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.